We are here on August the 22nd. A couple more days you'll have a birthday. I don't know if you want to tell us when you were born. This is Dr. Ralph E. Lapp, right? It's E, isn't it? Studying from his book. This is Alan Brodsky conducting the interview at Dr. Lapp's home. And that's his lovely wife, Jerry, over there. You must get a picture of her. Beautiful lady. And maybe I wish we could interview you too, Jerry, but we'll start with Ralph. And usually we start with your early life and what you remember that kind of led you on your way, who inspired you, that kind of thing. Where were you born? Where did you grow up? That wasn't long ago. You can remember that, huh?
Well, I grew up and was born in Buffalo, New York, in the middle class area, with a stone quarry just 2 blocks away, through which in high school I trudged to school, climbing a wire fence to get through the quarry and to avoid the guards who protected us from ourselves. But the area which I was largely German in the ethnic category. And I recall being influenced in my decision to become a scientist, being very influenced by 2 books. One was Sir James Jean's The Mysterious Universe, around 1928 it was written.
Year I was born.
Really? And the other was Arthur Collette, 100 Billion Guinea Pigs. Now that, you may not even remember it, but it was the consumer exposition of its time. And I was inspired by those 2. And I went through high school in Buffalo, and then I spent 2 years in a small Jesuit college, Canisius College.
Does that mean you were studying to be a priest at first?
I was the only non-Catholic in the school, which had interesting repercussions because I had made the top grades in all the courses and should have received a prize for that. But for me, they made a special ruling that my grades had to be average with the courses in religion.
You were studying science already?
Yes. However, I was really very taken up with literature. And right up until my sophomore year, I was trying to decide between English literature and physics. I couldn't make up my mind.
You have too much talent.
Then something happened which was completely unexpected. And I do not recommend this as a protocol for decision making. But Buffalo is known for its cold days. And one winter day, I came down with an infection in the nose. It went back into the ear and was excruciatingly painful. My family doctor, he was a member of the family, treated me by pouring hot oil in my ear. Well, that didn't help, and I realized I was in trouble. So
Treated you with, what did you say, hot oil?
Oil, yes.
Oil?
Oil.
You had to drink it, you mean?
In my ear, just poured in it.
Oh.
And so I spent 8 cents on a streetcar to drive to the public library and look up a specialist in surgery. I selected a young Italian doctor, and I went to visit him. He opened the door, looked at me, and picked up the telephone and said, "I'm calling the hospital." We operated immediately. Infection was going into the brain.
That was when you were in college already?
Yes. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you this, when I woke up after that operation, I knew I wanted to be a physicist. It was that simple.
Why is that?
Wrestling with a decision, and the recourse
It was in your head, huh?
was in my head. So I applied for scholarships to the University of Chicago. They chose that because of Arthur Compton.
Was that after you got your bachelor's, you mean?
That's where I got my bachelor's
You got your bachelor's at Chicago, huh?
in Chicago.
Uh-huh.
And Arthur Compton was my mentor. And of course, and I was interested in cosmic rays. Arthur Compton set me up with some research, including launching balloons with equipment on them from Stagg Field.
Mm-hmm.
And these balloons were reject balloons from Army signatories, so we got them for nothing. We put a payload of 80 pounds of battery-driven equipment, and the recording device was a Maxwell House coffee tin and a Big Bang clock. We rotated film, we sent these little light bulbs, which would give us coincidences with the cosmic rays. And we would launch them by having clusters of balloons, 5, 6 clusters, on the 20-yard line of the football field. And we would launch the balloon by lifting up the lead weights on the 20-yard line and get down to the end and let it go. I would rush over to a telephone and call Midway Airport to see if it was all right. And sometimes I'd get a wave off because of the DC-3 from the Turrican. But we had no money and we had no automatic equipment. So those balloons went up in the air to 100,000 feet. And they lingered until sunset.
You could calculate the height, is that it?
Yes. We had a barometer on board. And these flights led to unpredictable results. One had a power line in southern Illinois that took 2 counties out of power. One went over to Detroit. I recovered them. We had a unique recovery device. It was a little sign, $10 reward if you telephone us. And I got a call from the state police in Lansing, Michigan. And they wanted to know what to do because it looked awful suspicious. Like sticks of dynamite. We had yellow cambric cloth with red tape around it. And the officer said, well, I put part of it above me. Well, I slept on it, I didn't know if it had anything like up. Well,
Was that for your doctoral study, that kind of work?
that kind of work.
Uh-huh. And you worked under Arthur Compton,
Yes.
of the Compton effect.
Magnificent.
Yeah. Now, he came up with the Compton effect and published it, what, about 1925, was it?
Exactly.
Yeah, and
Of course, it revolutionized physics.
he wasn't at Chicago then, was he?
Yes, he was.
He was out there.
Deeply religious man.
Hmm.
Never swore or used any violence, except one time he swore. We had a launch, and photographers were present and photographed the launch. And he found the launch. And he had one more, as it happened when he came over and broke the cord, leaving him holding the bag. He said, "Damn." But Arthur was a magnificent person. I had a lot of Geiger counters, which were placed on racks. These are big counters. And I made those. Doing a lot of work, but you couldn't buy them, so I made them. And I also had an ionization chamber with 1,500 pounds per square inch of heating. And I was looking for coincidences between the bursts of cosmic rays as measured in the ionization chamber and the coincidence between the shower, which would trigger one of my 18 Geiger counters. Now these were infrequent.
You used the ionization burst to trigger the counters? Is that it?
They were the same phenomenon, the showers and the burst. And I remember these were only one a day and were significant. I remember changing the film in the dark of night all over on top of the press box. I remember changing the film, and right in the middle of my operation, all the counters banged at once. So I was in the middle of the shower with enormously powerful ionization. And Arthur Compton was the project director of the Manhattan division of the A-bomb project.
For the whole Chicago group, huh?
Yes.
Chicago Metallurgical Lab, they called it, huh?
Yes.
Yeah,
Met
Met Lab.
And it was rather interesting that the room in which the council room, in which the big decisions were made on the bomb project, were made in a room which was directly over the room in which uranium-235 was discovered. Rather interesting. Arthur Dempster was the discoverer of uranium-235. A very petite man, very small, very nervous, and difficult to deal with. I was his first employee, and I worked on equipment with which the uranium-235 was originally discovered.
That's after your doctorate, you mean?
After my doctorate.
You-
No,
you-
during,
huh?
because my doctorate was, I worked at nights on my doctorate. But I had to work on the project. I worked on the project half-time. And I knew about the project because I was a quarter top secret. Anyone who was on anyone who wanted to know where the bomb project was, all they had to do was send a postcard and send it to the top leading physicists in the United States. And they would get a response from Wisconsin that people from Wisconsin were at Los Alamos, the forwarding address for these postcards. So anyone who wanted to find out something could do it very easily.
So you think it was known, really, huh?
So I was the liaison between Chicago and Los Alamos on urgent jobs that required priority. So I used to shuttle back and forth by DC-3.
You got your PhD in cosmic ray physics, huh?
Yes.
Did you? And you stayed on at Chicago?
Stayed on there.
Uh-huh.
And then the war ended. I had become interested in the decision to drop the bomb. And until, what was it, 5 years ago, they had the anniversary of the letter which Leo Szilard wrote to the president. I realized, and I had circulated that letter
Oh, you did? Uh-huh.
to get signatures, urging the president to consider the use of the bomb in a specified way.
That was the letter that was written for Einstein's signature?
No.
No?
We've got another letter in mind.
That's a different letter.
Let's go back to that after a minute.
But this letter was written by who? By who?
Leo Szilard.
Neil Szilard. Leo Szilard. Uh-huh.
Right.
Did Szilard also write Einstein's letter for him? I understand somebody wrote his letter.
And Victor.
Oh, Wigner?
Eugene Victor.
He wrote the letter for Einstein. Huh? He was a fine man. I met him one time. Wigner.
Charming. What a shame for a mind like that. He should have come up with Alzheimer's again.
He seemed like a gentle, beautiful person.
There's one thing you could never do, and that was to get through the door after Victor. Impossible. And the reason that the bomb project started was that Szilard and Fermi and others tried to get the Army and Navy to get some money, especially to buy uranium. And Szilard tried it, but Szilard would not impress the military. But so they decided, Victor and Szilard decided they had to go cut corners and go around the opposition. So, and Szilard was very interested in getting Einstein to sign the letter, which he did one July day in 1939. drove out to Peconic Bay, and there was Einstein had a cottage there with a back porch, and the boy was playing on the porch. When Victor and Zai came up, Einstein, who was barefoot with just a summer clothing, shooed the boy off saying, "We have something important to do." Many years later, I was giving a lecture at a college in New York, and who should come up but the boy with the So we had an interesting chat. Well, the letter to get the president to consider limited use of the bomb, I didn't realize until I was invited to lecture in this in Washington. I didn't realize that I was the first one to sign it. And the next two signatures were years alive and no chairman. Archie was an astronomer. But two Nobel and Mulligan, Nobel Prize winner. So we had a good letter, but it got nowhere. And in fact, I hand carried the letter out to Los Angeles to get signatures. The Larry has been doing. And I didn't get a single signature. The bomb project was a train out of control. The scientists were going to make this bomb come hell or high water. And they did. But I got nowhere. At the end of the war, I would have three possibilities. I could really not stay at the project because the man who became director of the Argonne National Laboratory, and I didn't get along, so I couldn't stay. My two choices, Arthur Cotton asked me to join the staff of Washington University.
St. Louis?
St. Louis.
Oh, he moved from Chicago to St. Louis.
That's right.
But he started out at Chicago.
Many years. So my other choice was I was invited to join the staff of General Electric in Schenectady. But my decision again didn't come through any rational way of thinking. I happened to meet a Navy Captain Hyman G. Rickle. I showed him being assistant director. Oh, by the way, I had three jobs on the Avon project. I was a division director, assistant laboratory director, and I was a research physicist. So I had three different jobs. Oddly enough, my getting the job as assistant to the director and then later assistant director of the laboratory came about because in order to earn money during the summer for the school, I had to work. I worked at the Curtis Wright Aircraft Company in Buffalo, making $20 a week. And in the process, every 2 weeks I took the job of a man who went on vacation. So, without knowing it, I learned how the company operates. From stores, receipts, to sales, to purchasing, all of it. And when I was serving as a research physicist under the University of Chicago, it was awful because I told Compton, they're sabotaging our bomb project with all our paperwork. And so he said, well, if you know so much, we'll put you in charge of expediting. So it was made possible for me to sign anything up to $10,000. My signature meant no paperwork was required.
That's great.
So we got this.
What an experience.
And I worked with Arthur Dempster in analyzing uranium and the first fission product produced at Oak Ridge. Interesting story there. We were trying to identify the split atoms of uranium in the sense that we wanted to find out what their mass number was. And Seaborg, the chemist, could only tell us the chemistry. He couldn't tell us the physics. So,
He worked from California, I guess, huh?
no, he was at Chicago.
He was at Chicago a lot.
No chemistry. In fact, I'll show you later the big book that records his history magnificent. Diagram.
Yeah, is that the one Ron Catherine helped edit? Is that the one?
I think so.
Yeah. Was Schubert a classmate of yours in your PhD? He was in chemistry, Schubert, wasn't it? Jack Schubert?
Jack Schubert.
Is that when you met him back there
Yes.
in those days?
Only casually.
Oh.
I met him in a nightclub in Zurich, Switzerland.
You met him all the way over there.
And it was there, in this nightclub, that we were not inspired by the entertainment, but we drew the outline of nuclear radiation physics.
Lapp and Andrews.
Right. We sketched that out.
But you did that with Howard Andrews, right?
That's right. Right. I'm sorry, I got that confused.
Was Howard Andrews also in graduate school with you, or
No,
did he go?
Howard was a public health secretary.
I don't remember where he went to school. You ever hear from him, Howard Andrews?
I was at a conference with him about 12 years ago.
I haven't heard from him for decades.
He was a very, very nice chap, very good to know.
Worked with him a little bit on the Baltimore-Washington chapter back in the late 50s.
Yeah. But my decision to get back to that, my decision to make him combine on the bomb on Russia and Europe, as I say, was not very rational. I met Rickover and showed him around my laboratory, and he asked me to come to Washington. So I came down, took one look at what he was doing. I'd have to report to 5 different commanders, and that I wouldn't do. So I was walking in Georgetown, and as I was turning the corner, the car went by, and the chap yelled, "Hey, Ralph!" And it was a colonel who I'd been with at the bomb test at Bikini. So he took me to dinner. He said, "You know, there's a job open in the Pentagon for senior scientific advisor in the War Department General Staff. You'd be good for them."
That's about 1947,
46.
46. You were still pretty young then, I guess, huh?
Very young. However, I had this experience in business and at the Napa, which was very helpful. Well, I landed the job, and I received the same salary as Eddie Conlon, the director of the Bureau of Standards.
Oh,
So-
you went up fast.
However, I discovered within a few weeks after I went to the Pentagon that they really didn't want any advice.
They really didn't want
Want any advice.
advice. Huh?
So
They just wanted you to sit there. Huh?
So I spent time acquainting myself with military issues. And I got to work pretty closely with General Groves, whom the Army hated. The Army, the generals hated his
really?
idea of method. Oh, yeah. And I always have believed that General Groves deserved more credit than he got. But he was so foolish as to lunge at this, seeking praise and acclamation. And that's not the way you get it. It comes to you. That's in
He
front.
was in the Corps of Engineers, was he?
That's right. He built the Pentagon. He knew how to get things done. So I then made the decision that I have to leave. In 1949, I left federal employment. I left employment of any kind for all the rest of my life.
But you must have already written your book, Nuclear Radiation Physics, before that, huh?
It was written in 1948.
Because I know I studied from it, 1949 to 50.
Well, you know that book was the result of a series of lectures given at Bikini. Colonel Stafford Elmore was the man in charge of the bomb testing, radiation bombs, in 1946 at Bikini.
I remember that name. Was he a PhD or an MD?
MD.
MD.
tall, very handsome chap.
I never met him.
Well, we took the boat to the USS Haven from San Francisco to Bikini. And on the way out, we picked up a whole bunch of radiologists, top flight radiologists. And Staff Warren looked at me one day on the way out and said, Ralph, I want you to give a series of lectures to these MDs so they know more about what monitoring is and what this is all about. So I said, okay. And I had my PhD, fresh out of I planned a lecture. Well, I was curious. I said, now, the Röntgen is, they gave the standard definition of the Röntgen. Complete blank on the face of these radiologists. Complete. I knew I was in trouble. So I defined the Röntgen another way. And I got it down to ion pairs. Well, at least we could visualize the ion pairs. But that was my first acquaintance with the medical perception of radiation. That led to the, when I got back to Washington, I expanded the lecture series into a course given with Howard Andrews, after hours in Penn.
How did you meet Howard? At that point you met Howard?
I met Howard at Bikini.
Oh, at Bikini?
Yes. So,
And he was on some more tests after that, I think. Huh? But you weren't on other tests after that in the 50s,
I
or?
used to,
No.
I left the government, never to return. And however, I have had a number of commercial enterprises. I formed my own company in 1949, Lapp and Company. I think I called it Nuclear Science Service, was the title of my company. My little company had one employee, my wife.
Nuclear Science Service you called it first, rather than Lapp Incorporated. Lapp Incorporated came later. And Jerry, you met Jerry when?
That was in
53. Where did you two meet? Can't tell me?
Oh, sure. No, we met at the Carroll House, next to what is now the Russian Embassy, next door to it. And I used to go up on the roof and suntan, and Ralph was up there. And we got talking, and I found out that he wrote for the Reporter magazine, and I read the Reporter magazine. So, I was thrilled, a writer.
Were you a writer too?
No. I worked for the Navy Department for 3 years, and then, where did I go? In the Congress. I worked for a congressman, and then I worked for Kiplinger magazine. But I almost worked for the CIA, but I wouldn't take their lie detector test. Because everybody was talking about that. How, they couldn't tell whether you were telling the truth or not. And I said, if you'll ask me first if I'm taking this voluntarily, I'll take it. Because they'd said it was voluntary, and I said no. Anyway, I lasted 2 weeks in the CIA. That's my spy experience.
So you had a good career yourself too, huh?
Well, that was it. Then I worked for Ralph.
Well, I think one of the things which was most helpful was the trip to Japan, where we became involved in the Lucky Dragon episode.
That's
Yeah. You wrote a book on that one.
Yes, and my wife worked with me.
1954, huh?
It was written in 57.
It was written in 57.
We married in 56, and the bomb exploded in 54. But Ralph and we went to Japan together in 1957, in May of that year.
You went there to investigate this particular thing, huh?
Right. Ask Ralph how he got involved in
Well, actually, my interest in fallout came as a result of I have to go back down and say that in the process of my writing, I was extremely critical of the Atomic Energy Commission. And I would attend all the committee and atomic energy hearings in Capitol Hill and use data from Capitol Hill to formulate my own perception of radiation risk. And the Reporter magazine was one of the vehicles I used. The New York Times magazine, Harper's magazine. I was earning my living by writing. I was being very critical of the Atomic Energy Commission.
You felt they weren't safe enough, is that it?
I felt that the secrecy obscured the democratic process, that we were doing things that we probably shouldn't be doing. I'll try to explain that in just a moment. But in the process of my writing, I irritated the chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission.
Who was that, Louis Strauss?
Admiral Strauss.
Admiral Strauss.
I was public enemy number one. Now this, I had some industrial consultantships, Bendix and others, and I had to give them up. It was hostile to their interests. So I had to earn a living by writing. Surely by writing for books doesn't earn a living. You just can't do it. So
You were hostile in what way? It's interesting for historical reasons. I always wondered myself, actually, because I remember feeling that Louis Strauss should never have said clean bomb, because it's, you know, nobody would believe it completely. We should always have explained to the public the levels of risk, and that as you go up in radiation, you go up in risk. As you go down in risk. And you know how to go down as well as up.
well, what irritated me with the Admiral was he told dinner companions at a dinner one evening I was employed by the Soviet Union. And that blew my top. I wrote him a scorching letter. But they were all powerful. I mean, the Director of Public Relations, Public Information, Niels Salisbury was his name, would go to editors of newspapers, of magazines, and try to get them not to accept my article. Weird. I mean, just because I disagreed with them.
That's interesting, because now it's the other extreme, isn't it?
Now it's the other
Now they
way.
won't. Now the NRC. I went to hearings. They wouldn't even look at me if I tried to defend them. You know?
It's quite different. So in the process, I realized I had to hit big time in dollars. I wasn't making much money at all. And the way it happened was, I had worked with Stewartson, who was in Georgetown. Worked with him on articles for his column. And in the process, we started working for Saturday Evening Post. And that was big bucks. It was only a 5-cent magazine.
Did you write only science material or other things?
Just on science.
Science.
Well, I wrote in collaboration with Stewartson. For example, I wrote with him an article on Louis Slotin.
Louis Slotin. Yeah.
He was the man who taught me how to make Geiger counters.
He'd already died when you wrote the article, I guess. Huh?
That's right, but I knew him from university. And I wrote a story about the strange death of Louis Slotin.
Louis Slotin had already been also been at Chicago.
Yes,
He's a fellow graduate student. Huh?
that's right.
You met a lot of people in those days, didn't you?
Oh, amazing. And talent.
Well, I guess talent flocked to Arthur Compton, huh?
That's right. And Enrico Fermi.
Enrico Fermi, yeah.
In the post-war period, my office was right next to Fermi.
You got to know him too.
And got to know him. He used to borrow my calculator.
Was he kindly toward you?
Oh, I couldn't believe it. A real gentleman. Zillard was not a matter. He was quite touchy.
Yeah.
But Fermi was a competitor. Really was. And the nicest guy you want to meet. Loved athletics, loved swimming. Loved to compete. Well, in the process of working with the also with Stewart. I got to meet his brother, Joseph. And very famous, the two most famous colonists in the United States. And one day I was having lunch with him, with Stewart, and Joe came in, and he said, I've just had lunch with the Secretary of Defense. At that time it was Mr. Johnson. And he said, he's very worried about radioactive fallout. Why don't you look into that? So I had been lecturing all around the country. I did 54 university lectures in 1 year.
Wow. You're a traveler.
I was really traveling.
And you probably kept Jerry busy too, travel a little bit, huh?
To the aircraft. She would come and pick me up at the airport.
Like a candle.
Do you have any boys yet? Do you have any children?
They came in
58 and 61.
58 and 61.
Yes.
Chris
Because
is
we were married in 56. So,
Chris is a PhD from MIT in nuclear engineering.
In nuclear engineering,
He has assorted degrees in environmental science.
huh? Where does he work now, Chris?
And that's a little difficult to answer because he doesn't do anything. He works at Calvert Cliffs as technical consultant. He works at a corporation in Washington, D.C., which is a venture capital. And by the way, in the course of my working on Fallout, I got to meet many political people. Estes Kefauver,
Yeah, I remember him.
Anthony Stevenson.
I liked those people. I didn't know them, but I liked them.
I was one of Anthony Stevenson's science advisors.
Wonderful.
And
I was hoping he could win the presidency at the time.
Oh, he was a man.
Beautiful speaker.
It was-
But I did feel he used too many fancy words for the public when he spoke to the public. I
that's
did feel he used too many syllables sometimes. I could feel it. I think that must have been his problem.
But it was so fun.
Although he was up against tough opposition, wasn't
he was too smart.
And he wanted advice on bomb testing. Well, after events of that nature interacted with him, Kennedy became president, and as a Democrat, I had supported them, and actually had recommended to Stevenson, and wrote him a 3-page letter urging that they create a Science and Technology Committee to advise the Democrats who are out of power on matters relating to science. I listed 7 different scientific topics. I listed 13 scientists whom I thought, I didn't know whether they were Democrats or Republicans. I figured they were good scientists and were Democrats. And within 2 weeks after receiving one letter, Adlai Stevenson produced the committee. And that committee was one of the other things it did. It created the advisory function, worked on that, and it urged the creation of a National Peace Agency. Now, it wasn't called that afterwards, but President Truman signed it and was introduced into Congress. We didn't get it into the Senate because that was a more political problem. So what we did, we went to the man we thought would be very hard-nosed about it, and that was Stewartson. Well, we took it to him, but he was hard-nosed. He wouldn't buy it. So then we took it. We didn't go to Humphrey because we knew Senator Humphrey was already in favor of it. We wanted somebody who was converted.
This is the peace agency, you mean?
Yeah. So we went to see Ted Sorensen. And Sorensen said, well, he said, the title is wrong. He said, my senator believes that the Russians have preempted the word peace. So I was appointed with Mr. Feldman, Mike Feldman, was number 2 man to Kennedy. We had lunch at the Mayflower, and I came up with the name U.S. Arms Control Agency. Later that was called anti-disarmament. So I hadn't put disarmament in my objection to it. And then that became the National Peace Agency became the Arms Control Agency, which showed we were dealing with a scientific problem of enormous global impact. Well, you see, my life was caught up in the interfaces between science, society, and politics. And I more or less moved with the current. I continue to write. At the present time, I've written 22 books.
22. Thought it was more than that. There's so many.
Well, I did a lot of writing for magazines.
What was the Schubert Napa? When was that? 1957?
1957.
How did you come to write that?
Well, that one was the result of mutual concern that the medical profession was not properly policing the radiation protection.
Well, you got on that very early, too.
And, for example, dentists, some dentists in Chicago, were giving every 6 months a full nose dental x-ray. I mean, $400. I mean, and they didn't, it was a matter of money. X-rays are very profitable. So, that was the origin was plus follow later on.
So did you write on both subjects in that book? Or did you split it up with him?
Both.
You wrote together, huh?
We wrote, each one had a chapter or something. But there was a good working relationship.
Was Schubert living in Washington then?
No, he was up at Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh. Well, yeah, I saw him at Pittsburgh, and he must have come back to Pittsburgh. When he came back to Pittsburgh, I was still studying for my doctoral there in the same department. Well, I was studying for my doctoral in biostatistics, but I was involved in the department when Schubert came aboard, and we became friends, and I helped him with some of his graduate students. And then when I got my doctorate, they made me an associate professor on the faculty with him, so we were colleagues on the faculty for about 8, 9 years. Became very fond of him, even though he gave some of my doctoral students a very hard time.
Well,
But he was a good scientist, and we did a lot of things together.
I didn't realize it, but he even wrote about the Big Bang theory of creation.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
I know he read a book on copper chemistry, a number of things.
And then he became somewhat famous for his electronic amplification for astronomy.
Yeah.
They were much respected for that.
Schubert, Jack Schubert, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I'm talking about the chemist Schubert, yeah. Schubert and Lapp was a book on the safety of medical, I guess, huh? Yeah. So
Too many names.
yeah, there's so many people.
We have some water here.
Yeah.
Would you like any water? Would you like
Water
some?
would be good,
Orange
yeah.
juice?
I just had I'll have some water, thanks. Thank you very much. Well, how did you come to join the Health Physics Society? I saw you joined in 1989 or something.
Well, I've done a joiner. And one of the reasons, being a single consultant, we joined the Health Physics Society and they want you to do things, which they don't pay for.
Yeah, I've done
It
that.
was purely voluntary.
So,
But I obviously kept up with it.
but then you did join because you liked the magazine?
Yeah, no, I joined the society.
Because of the issues. You got involved in epidemiology and all these other things as well as physics and
Yeah, exactly.
public information, public relations, and politics. And when did you get interested in epidemiology?
I can't. I think I have to answer that I got interested because of the American
Because of what?
biological effects of ionizing.
Yeah. I remember in the hearings in 1979 you came up to me for the first time, or maybe it was 1978, and I'd never met you before, and you were very gracious to tell me how wonderful my testimony was. You introduce yourself, Ralph Lapp, and say, oh my gosh, I studied from your textbook.
You know, that's one of the most rewarding things.
Yeah.
To give
I must have
lecture.
sold a lot of copies of that book.
Yes, it went to a number of editions. And it was written so that you could understand it without going to class.
It was very readable, yes.
And then we took the questions directly from actual
Hmm.
projects or problem.
You even had a little chapter on radiation safety in the back there.
It was the first time this was done. And that of course stimulated my interest. But the epidemiology of the Bayer group was important. And so I had to learn about statistics and to follow it. And then I spend a day a week, piping half a day at the George Washington Medical Library. And there I go through about 20 magazines to see which ones pertain to are of interest to me. I take these and write one-page synopses and interpretations, which I sell to my clients.
That's great, that's great.
Because I've been a consultant at over 40 different nuclear power units.
Quite a
But
reputation.
eventually there came a time when it was too much. I was finding myself hurting from the travel.
I can imagine, I couldn't do it. Even as little as maybe 8-10 years ago, I stopped giving courses because it was just too much to travel and stand up all day. But my friend Herman Sember is 5 years older than I, and he still runs around the country. He can drop a hat, he can talk for 10 or 8 hours. He's marvelous. He teaches at 3 universities. We were friends.
One of the things I did, of which I'm very proud, is I figured that after we got these Nobel Prize winners on this advisory committee of science and technology, if we could get them to express themselves on a scientific topic which involves politics, why couldn't we tap their brains for consulting on the industrial basis? So I formed a company. A man who had been purely a politician, Charles Tyrone III, and I formed a company with 2 Nobel Prize winners and with a group of scientists, Joshua Lenneberg, and later on we had Hans Hermann Muller, the geneticist, Harold Urey, and the idea was...
Hans Beta too? Is it Hans Beta?
Is Hans Beta on the committee now?
Ex officio,
Oh, okay.
because he had certain connections with government he didn't want. So, I always maintained good relations with Hans. I'll discuss that in a moment. Let me discuss it and we'll come back to it. I worked with Hans on a political problem in town, which required a press conference at the National Press Conference. And we were successful in fighting the evils of some of the antis. And we invited him to stay with us, which he did. And we had a meal, which my wife made. And it was famous because someone had given me a bottle of Chateau Rothschild, which was, today it would be $1,000 a bottle.
Wow.
Well, it was just as useful then because although Hans doesn't drink hard liquor, he likes wine. And after we had finished the bottle, I said, Hans, what did it feel like to be the first man to discover how the universe runs? Thermonuclear energy. And he giggled. And he said, no, I don't know. He said, it only took 27 days to do the calculations and I wondered why nobody else had done them.
Can you talk a
Sorry.
little louder for me?
I think it'll pick it up.
Will it?
It's amazing. See, I'm fairly close. That's a nice thing about this. I can sit here.
I'll try, but danger of coughing.
You don't want to hurt yourself, I had the pleasure of driving Hans Beta from the airport up to a Sigma Psi meeting where he taught once. Very nice person. It's the only time I met him.
We're returning to forming this company. It was called Quadratic Science. Quadratic being earth sciences, ocean sciences, space sciences, and, well, oceanography. And so this was a very interesting capsule venture. We had a eminent man as our treasurer who bought stock in the company he believed in. And our idea was we would take stock and exchange it for stock of a company that was doing business. Stock equity exchange, it's called. No money, just equity. Well, we had our first equity exchange was the Boner, complete. One of my Nobel Prize winners that picked it. It was no good. Next one we hit even and made some cash. Then we got into communication and electronics. And that went through the roof. We bought our stock at a penny a share. We sold it for $13.
Wow.
That's the way to play the stock.
That's the company you helped form. And you bought these other companies, by equity, huh?
We made 4 equities.
Hmm.
We made 4 equity exchanges. Well, it was an interesting venture. So that essentially is a kind of a migratory expedition through life. And I'm still consulting, but not if it requires air travel. Air travel has become torture.
Yeah. Just running through the airports is a lot of work these days. So crowded.
Stopped when he was 70, so that's a pretty long time to be flying around the country.
Well, you can always do a lot of business locally, I guess, huh?
And by telephone,
And by telephone.
written, so
Use the computer?
no, I don't.
Don't use the computer.
Because the kind of thing, much of what I need isn't there. For example, if certain references I want, you have to pay the subscription price to get the thing. That's ridiculous.
I see. And it's nice to work in a library too, isn't it?
Well, this is a real liaison approach. And you never know. Sometimes you just on the corner of your eye you see
Yeah.
some obscure Scandinavian journal, something like that. You pick it up and just browse through it. And there's
Yeah.
also some of the most technical magazines sometimes have articles of popular interest.
So you go about once a week to the library?
Yeah. Actually, I go to 2 different libraries twice a week.
Twice a week. Good habit. Good habit. I used to think when I came back to this area, I'd go every week, but always too busy. I keep some references at home. That's a journal.
I believe one of our big problems in science today is the admixture of science and politics in the public. In that things, you get an issue of a technical nature, and it gets a sound bite of 10 seconds. There's no way you can handle a scientific problem that way. You can't do it in 10 minutes.
Yeah,
And therefore,
maybe you could give us some advice as to where we should go from here in trying to inform the public. There's some people who are just doing the opposite. They're doing all the damage.
part of
It
our
seems
problem,
these people who do the damage have energy to work all the time on it. You knew about Ernie Stringlis. I tried to bring him down there. I didn't have any luck. Now he's being replaced by this Stephen Wing.
yes,
And you saw my Appendix C, my letter to the Journal of American Medical Association about his work. And I guess you've seen the other of his work. What do you think about people like him?
you better, I'm going to do it. I don't have that.
You don't have my book?
Oh, appendix C.
See,
I'm sorry, of course. I
I thought I sent you one,
got it.
a copy with this autograph or something.
Yes,
If not, I'm pretty sure I did. But,
excuse me.
All right, I'm ready.
Okay. Well, the problem of translating material of a controversial nature from the sanctuary within science, the gates of science, to the public domain is infinitely complex, because we are not dealing with just an external critic. We are dealing with those who are within the scientific community and who have a somewhat ambiguous approach. They do submit articles for peer review, although much of the material is not peer reviewed. In some cases, the peer review can be defective, does not really protect. But with Dr. Steve Wing, he is more dangerous than Sternglass, although Sternglass himself is quite effective in rousing public concern. But Dr. Wing is a cut above that in terms of his technical ability. But the problem of how you manage to deal with the internal criticism, the internal stir-up, doesn't have any easy solution at all. We are not fighting the Visigoths. We're fighting a more sophisticated group. And many of them have financial backing because well-meaning people think it's well to encourage the whistleblower. But the whistleblower the whistle blowing can lead to distortion of the democratic process. Look back at the Allies.
Yet you were an early whistleblower when you felt it was justified, right?
And I always put my numbers first. For example, I guess I was one of the first to make a public protest about atmospheric tests in Nevada. And I didn't do that because I was frightened by the few tests we'd had. I did it because there was a increase in the magnitude of the test. They were going from sub-kiloton to 50 kiloton. Secondly, they were increasing the number that was being used. And thirdly, they were not monitoring close enough, given our state of biological knowledge. It was a combination of the three things, the projection to the future, that we may have a problem. And I prepared my material and published. For example, in Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, I have many articles which were published.
Well, in retrospect, do you feel that you were over-concerned at the time based on what we know now? Is it that you felt they were not careful enough based on the little they knew? That's what you're talking. That's what you're saying. Huh?
Our knowledge was very fragmentary. However, the fact is, the protesting brought an end to testing.
Testing, yeah, it did.
So
I didn't like the atmospheric testing either, but I happened to be in the Division of Biology and Medicine. You know, Chuck Dunham and people like that. I felt that they were caring. They did try to set limits on what we got when we went out to the tests and so on.
But some of the people in the Division of B&M, Biology and Medicine, some of those people were highly politicized.
But what era do you talk about? What era? Because I was there.
1955.
See, I was there 57 to 60.
It had peaked by then. It had peaked by then.
And when you're talking, was Dunham in charge or Boer or who?
Boer and Dunham and Dunning.
Dunning, Gordon Dunning.
Gordon Dunning.
I knew him.
He was kind of a swashbuckler.
Yeah. He was very friendly to me. He respected me. I was just a young fellow there.
So I think that this problem of communicating is extremely difficult because you're dealing with those who are self-serving. And so far as the media are concerned, if you do educate a reporter so very skillful, a couple of weeks go by and he's no longer writing at that, moved out. So the education is a process, but part of this is it's all being, an argument is conducted within the clouds of controversy, which tend to give maximum exposure to the most sensational topic.
Yeah. Of course, it would be nice if the news people would hire some people who have some scientific background, wouldn't it? Who could look into things in a little more depth and examine whether the scientific statements are valid or not valid. But they don't do that, do they? Generally.
It takes a lot of work,
Yeah.
and there's a tendency to go along. Don't rock the boat.
Well, in my three appendices, I try to show how you could write something that could be understood by an intelligent public.
Yeah.
And I feel that my first appendix, where I presented this face-to-face with the jury, that they understood me. Do you think that is possible to explain things to at least the intelligent community who will think about what you say and maybe sway at least a portion of the American public?
Well, the answer to the question is it depends. Depends very much on how complex the issue is. There's a big debate now on whether or not the dose response has a threshold. Radiation dose.
Yes, I've heard a lot of that.
Does it have a threshold? Now, the current issue of radiation research has an article called Radiation-Related Cancer Risks at Low Doses Among Atomic Bomb Survivors. The problem I use to illustrate that here is the curve which is definitive, in which we plot the relative risk versus dose. This will blow up with us. How does one convey a sense of where the risk is when you have to go through a lot of assumptions? For example, the public thinks in terms of, is it safe? They don't ask that very much about automobiles. They accept a risk, but they will not accept uncertainty. The public seeks certainty.
I think we have to teach the public that safe means not a very large risk, because every day we take small risks, and we call things safe. We have to talk about levels. But a lot of people don't agree with me. A lot of people don't think the public can understand quantitation. I think if it's kept simple, they understand chance. They played cards and so on.
Yeah,
And they know the chance of winning a lottery might be 1 in 100 million. I think they can you don't use 10 to the minus 8, but you can say 1 in 100 million. Don't you think most public would understand that? 1 in 100 million?
I'll throw it back at you. If they understood the odds, why would they put any money on the table?
Because they like the chance.
But here is an article in the issue of Lancet. And Lancet, in my opinion, I will give this to you.
Are those copies for me?
Yes. This Lancet article is longevity of atomic bomb survivors. You tell the average person that the people among Hiroshima survivors are the oldest surviving population in the planet. And they won't believe it. If you go to the public and say...
Don't you think some people will believe it and some won't?
Some
Don't you think there's a distribution of perception?
There certainly is, but I think it's very small. It's skewed. I think that if you ask a little quiz, the percentage of cancer deaths at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, is it 10? Is it 1%? 10%? 50%? 100%? If you gave that quiz to a high school class today, the answers would be all up around 70, in my opinion. If you tell them it's only 4%, they don't believe it. They just don't believe you. And, you know, because they think it's all, you see, it's a wedding between words, radiation and cancer.
And danger, yeah.
And danger. It's a risk.
Danger means high risk to most people.
So, the question, public risk assessment is unknown territory.
You've certainly done more than one person's share yourself to educate the public, writing 22 books. That's amazing. I wish I had a copy of every one of them. I've got a few. I think I wrote a review of one of your books, didn't I? A few years back.
You wrote a beautiful review.
Yeah. But we have to give these people, I've started giving books to people as gifts once in a while, you know, something they can use that they can learn from. But you can't do that for everybody.
If you take an example of risk-taking, it becomes so highly politicized. We had, for example, the history of thyroid cancer. The Congress instructed the National Cancer Institute to come up with an assessment of the probability of causation of a diagnosed cancer and radiation dose. Well, in 1985, we published a report called Radio Epidemiological Tables.
Yeah, I've got a summary in the book, you see.
Yeah.
Simple summary. Yeah.
The new one is coming out.
Is it coming out?
It's finished. It's coming out next month. That, according to the guy who wrote it, which is Charlie Land.
Charlie Land wrote it?
Basically, it's being reviewed.
You feel he's a good objective scientist, huh?
I don't think he's very good at translating risk.
I mean, in terms you can understand, you
In
mean.
terms you can understand, he's a true scientist. And that isn't his department.
Yeah.
He doesn't, well, at about the time this thick book, 400 pages, came out, the tables, the issue of radioactive iodine emitted from the Hanford reactors in 1944-45 came up. And also came up the iodine-131 released in bumped atmospheric tests in Nevada. Now, if you wish to see an exaggeration of a problem, you take the two reports that the National Cancer Institute published. If you like to thrill, I'll go get them. Because they illustrate the...
I'll let you talk a little bit more about fallout and then go back to some other things. So you thought the probability causation you're saying in due to the fallout was...
The probability of causation tables would be in the new set would be very difficult to square with the previous edition.
You looked them over already, huh?
Well, no matter what they say, it'll be somewhat different from the prior.
You think they'll use the Beer 5 estimates, which lower the dose for the same risk?
Yeah, but I think what's involved here is that the lawyers will cut them to pieces. The lawyers say, now which Bear report I used, which table I used, and the moment they say the difference, they'll say what those differences mean. What are they going to say about radioiodine? We don't know. How does the public understand this kind of frothy stuff? I mean, most scientists don't even know about this stuff. Really.
Yeah. Well, I can see there you've done a lot of independent work in many fields, and you still speak eloquently about the latest up-to-date information coming out in radiation epidemiology, radiation biology. Let's go back and see if you'd like to review your parents and your your family and other people you'd like to mention who have meant something to you in your life. I know there are hundreds of people the way you have traveled around and the great people you worked with who must have inspired you. But maybe in addition to those you've mentioned, maybe you'd like to go back and go through your life and think about that.
Okay, give me a pit stop and we'll go back.
Okay. Okay.
Looking back over a period of almost 83 years, of which my memory extends to about age 5, I think, and an automobile ran over my bicycle, causing me utter grief.
You get hurt.
No, luckily I wasn't involved. But it was my first encounter with real adversity. We lived in a German section of Buffalo. My father was a mechanic machinist with the Pierce Arrow Motor Company, a luxury car. And when it went out of business, he started working in the aircraft industry. And then he had a health problem. And so he went from machining to the first IBM sorter in the company. And he was always very fast with numbers. On the feminine side, my mother had gone through part of high school. My father had high school. My grandfather, on one side, and on the maternal side, was a blacksmith.
You remember?
Yes. And he escaped soldiering in Germany. And with his German pride came here. On the other side of the family, there was my grandfather was actually broke his back preparing belts of overhead planes. And in the early days, all plants ran from overhead belt drive. And the power came down the line and then was tapped off into those places. And he fell one day over a lathe and broke his back.
Mm.
Always we maintained a cheerful disposition. My grandfather in Germany never made it through grade school. So there wasn't much of an educational background from which to spring, but there was always the understanding that you should try to do better, try to learn as much as you can. And I managed to squeak through financially, but it was just that, it was touch and go. Luckily, I managed to get the prime fellowship at the university for 3 years, so it paid my way in there. That, when the bomb project, if I may just refer back to it, personality-wise, on the bomb project, my first boss, undercut, was Farrington Daniels, physical chemist.
Yeah, he's famous.
A magnificent person. The, so to speak, the godfather or grandfather of solar energy. Here's a man who took his techniques to India, and he developed for a cost of $22 a solar aluminum lens, so to speak, to catch the sun's rays so that the people in the village could heat their food. They said even $22 was too much. He said he had to develop the cheapest thing. And here, Farrington Daniels wanted to build the first atomic reactor after the war, and he asked me to be project director. It turned out Farrington fell into disfavor because he was a chemist. And all the physicists were in charge of politics for the post-atomic reactor. It's never, Farrington, who was a perfect gentleman, could never get over this. He said, why are they blocking me? Why won't they listen? The pebble bed reactor is the way to go.
Yeah. He discovered thermoluminescence too, didn't he?
Indeed.
Yeah.
He's the grandfather of the TLD.
Yeah.
a very good, the best person you can think of to do a lot of work with.
So you had an additional inspiration there. Did you have any brothers or sisters?
I have two brothers, they're twins. They're both dead.
Were they identical twins?
No. They're quite unlike, both bright. Both bright as hell. Me and my sister was also very bright. They all went in grade school, which I attended to stay attended. They got the highest grades. And along comes Ralph. And I remember very graphically a sudden swerve in my educational career. I was in the lower grade, looking up at that clock, big clock, trying to figure out if 3 o'clock came, everybody left. I couldn't figure out what that meant. One day I looked up at the clock, and I suddenly knew what it meant. And from that point on, learning was a joy. But it was as simple as that. And high school, I had very good teachers, which was, I think, determined to really first class.
And you liked math in high school, I guess, huh?
Yes, I took all the courses they had. But I still was interested in English literature, carrying right through the sophomore year in college.
That's wonderful.
I'm very impressed with Tom Wolfe, the Homeward Angel. It was a great book, I thought.
I didn't have much culture. I studied engineering. I liked to read when I was a youngster, but after I got into engineering and physics, mostly I read scientific or engineering books. Well into the night, usually.
I loved, we had a man, a neighbor who was a draftsman, a patent attorney type. And I knew him quite well, and I was concerned about possibly becoming a draftsman myself. But I ran into the business that working over a white surface, a large white surface, I had vitreous floaters in my eyes, and this became very annoying, so that ended my career as a draftsman.
Looks like my battery is going down. I better replace that. So I'll stop here. Well, on the beautiful view here, have you named this Ralph Lapp estate?
No,
It's beautiful. Did you design this home, you and Jerry?
part of it.
It's a beautiful design. It looks so spacious inside.
It does look very big from the outside.
Yeah. Let's see if I can look through the trees. Sometimes you can zoom in on something farther away. I saw a beautiful sunset picture. I guess I can't do that here.
No, because
That's the east. I mean sunrises. I said sunsets.
added a deck, if you want to go out and see the deck. These are two,
State in Philadelphia. That's Our Lady.
that was a scroll, and it
Beautiful.
began to crack, yeah. So
Who
we
did
put it
that?
under
Is
glass.
that Oriental?
Yes, very
Uh-huh. It looks like-
Chinese. Oh, don't, honey, no, don't go in the other rooms, huh?
No,
You can go,
okay.
you can go in, our son did that. Oh, I'll show you something.
Oh, he's an artist. Is that the one who's an artist?
Yes, he really does great big events.
That's an interesting picture. It's his own idea, huh?
Yeah, he does, something else he did.
Sound just like my wife.
There's something else he did right here that I like. This. And iron oxide and
Is he in the
clear-
area here?
Here he is, if you want to see him. Here's Nicholas with his dog.
Take it back a little farther because
Sasha.
it's so close.
Oh, you don't,
Actually, I can get closer to it from farther away, actually, see. See, I can zoom in on it with this. It's amazing. And this is not the best camera, but still, look at that.
I'll put my thumb there.
See that picture, Ralph?
I mean,
Look at that. You can put that on a TV screen, you've got a big picture.
Wow.
here, look what he did with his name.
Just as big.
Your son did this?
No, no,
Oh,
no.
no.
That's a real,
Oh.
that's a real, isn't that beautiful? You got any light?
You say Ralph wrote something?
Well, all the books he's written.
Oh,
You know,
because of the
he's a-
books.
Yeah, because of the books.
I see.
It's this shell, but it was in a it's a geode. See, that was a rock, and that one was caught.
280 million years old.
Wow. And the shell he found?
No,
No,
No.
we didn't.
purchased.
We
Purchased the
bought
shell?
this.
I got it before Smithsonian.
Oh.
They were going to buy it.
We got an original herb block.
Who are these people? Is that you?
That's us in Japan.
In Japan?
Yeah,
What?
it's short hair. Then
That was
we're
what-
that wasn't on the Lucky Dragon because I didn't walk the plank.
Is that Ralph pointing?
That's
Yeah.
Ralph pointing. Yeah, we
Yeah.
had short hair and no beard. And
Look, I
that
can-
was the first year we were
Look
married.
how I can enlarge this. Look.
Oh my God!
See how
He has
pretty?
short hair. I looked a
That's
lot
it.
better then.
Back at the U.S. Saratoga. Radioactive,
It's radioactive?
it was.
Was, huh? From fallout, huh?
Right.
That's amazing, though, how you can get this.
Yeah.
Look at the
Yeah,
bikini tests, huh?
Uh-huh. The memoirs. I bought
Now,
it.
how does that come out?
Comes out beautiful in Japan. A lot of them are made in Japan. Oh, wait,
Yeah, an original.
office here.
Okay.
Here's Ralph's busy office. You have all of your 22 books alongside of themselves
They're
in one place?
downstairs. Yeah, they're all
They're
in one place
downstairs.
downstairs. You want to come?
It's a nice office. A beautiful view. And here are Ralph Lapp's books. And foreign editions on the bottom shelf. Good part of it. So tell me about it.
Should you turn the light
Tell
on?
me
or-
about it. Tell me about it. No, it's good. Let's
It,
go.
it was a scroll.
Yeah.
Imperial Garden Party.
A Pier Garden Party.
Author unknown.
Mm-hmm.
Artist unknown. But this is 16 feet long.
16 feet. Wow.
And
Is it made all by hand?
it's all painted.
Beautiful.
It's got 100 characters in
See,
it.
the windows are
Plus birds,
reflecting.
horses.
And it's from China, huh?
Uh-huh.
I know it's a matter. The light is reflecting. I'd have to close.
That's all right. I'm moving over here, so
Those draperies.
I moved over so that I get a different view.
Okay.
Oh, it's a beautiful room. Let me just get a... So you have a desk here to work at too, huh?
This is my desk.
No, that's your desk?
That's my desk, yeah, where I handle what.
Oh, you built a beautiful place. Oh, you have an exercise machine.
I haven't been on our land.
Oh, you go to Park Federal Property and 90 feet above the Potomac.
Right,
I remember when I was here for dinner, it was a gorgeous view.
yes,
To see water does something to you.
yeah. It's just,
We live in a place near the water. We don't live on the water. We're 6 miles from the ocean.
Whoa.
We love Ocean Pines. It has a lot of activities.
Where's Ocean Pines?
7,000 homes.
Wow.
Bedroom down here.
Yeah,
Is this
that's a guest bedroom.
is this one of the? Is this the 5th bedroom?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Look at this.
and Nikki did this. Who did that?
Oh,
Yeah, if you get where Ralph is, you get a
That's
better
beautiful.
shot. What he does is a lot of events, if you know what I mean.
yeah.
You gotta plan everything, huge parties with hundreds of people, and they design, he gets all this stuff, all the,
So it's not only
he
his.
does big weddings.
It's not only his own art,
He
but
worked at the White House.
he does other people's art.
Decorated.
He has events for other people's art too. Huh?
No, not for art, it's for parties.
Oh, for parties.
Weddings and,
Wow.
and big, anytime there's a huge gathering, you know.
I guess that's an art too, huh?
Yeah, but the biggest one was, they did the White House and all the fancy
Mm-hmm.
designers, and
Who are these people? You?
that's us on Chris's boat, yeah.
How long ago was that?
Oh, about 5 years ago, maybe.
Got the beard there, huh?
He's got a beard, yeah, like he has a beard now. What's your beard?
That's a nice picture.